Now, here's an assorted stuff of mine that doesn't fit in the game room. Hey, everybody. So, this here is my 1988 Buick Reatta. Those of you who already know the story about this car can probably figure out why I would want to own one of these. But for the rest of you who aren't familiar with the Riata, this little red thing possesses some of the absolutely wildest and insanely advanced technology you could possibly get in any car at the time that this thing was released. I suppose my little teaser that I started the video with gives the surprise away, but let's just get right to it. This car from 1988 has a CRT touchscreen. And this touchscreen isn't some aftermarket piece. No, this screen was installed by General Motors into this car when it was built. What you are looking at here is one of the very first touchscreens ever installed in an automobile as a factory feature. Now, before we begin diving into this thing, for clarification, the Riata wasn't the very first car built by GM to feature this screen. Originally, this technology debuted on the Buick Riviera during the 1986 model year, and was also made available on the fourth generation Oldsmobile Tornado as well. However, unlike on the Riviera and the Tornado, where it was only a high-cost optional feature, the touchscreen was standard equipment in the Riata. Every Riata that was built during the first two model years came with a touchscreen installed. But yeah, time to show you what this thing can actually do. So the screen itself is a 5-inch monochromatic CRT with a green phosphor coating. Over the face of the tube lies a plastic touch matrix for detecting your finger when it makes contact with the screen. To aid in navigating around the screen's interface, the main functions of the display are grouped into 6 sections, with each of these 6 having a dedicated physical button around the screen's bezel. On first startup, the screen defaults to the summary page. This page serves as an all-in-one overview that offers the most basic controls for the radio and HVAC system, displaying system messages, and your calendar. Starting with the button in the upper left, we have the climate control screen, where you can adjust your temperature controls. I particularly love that not only is the fan icon animated when you have the blower running, but it also changes speed depending on how fast it is going as well. On the upper right is your radio screen. Here you'll find all of the controls for the Riata sound system, including a full graphic equalizer made up of literal graphics on the screen. I also particularly love how the cassette player door is ejected through the screen itself, and by turning on the radio, the antenna automatically raises on the rear of the car. On the lower left is the button for the page I probably set the screen to the most, which is your gauge screen. Here you have all of your important engine information, including oil pressure, voltage, coolant temp, and of course a large tachometer. And oh yes, all of these update in real time as you drive the car around. And then in the middle, we have the options page, which allows you to access some of the other built-in features that are programmed into the screen. Under Trip Computer, you have a rudimentary arrival time calculator, which estimates your expected ETA based on a distance to your destination that you pre-program into it. Trip Monitor gives you everything that the car has calculated about your trip thus far, such as fuel economy, average speed, time elapsed, and even the total amount of fuel consumed since the last reset. Lastly, Reminder allows you to enter in a variety of personal messages and program it to display under different circumstances when you first start the car, such as an important date to remember or even just a reminder to pick up groceries after work. And then finally, the status page gives you settings for adjusting the screen itself, the location where you program in the calendar for your car, and some basic diagnostic tools. Oh, and speaking of diagnostics, there's actually a hidden 7th page in this touchscreen. So by going over to the climate page and pressing down on the off and warm buttons at the same time, you can then access the complete onboard diagnostics for the car itself. And here you can check and clear codes as well as view what nearly every sensor in the car is reading, not just the 4 that appear on the gauges screen. Seriously, this feature is almost more intuitive to use than a regular handheld OBD scanner. And given how detailed it is, this page can really help with some of the guesswork when trying to figure out an issue with the car. Now, even though it isn't anywhere near as cool as the CRT touchscreen, the digital dashboard that the Riata also has is still quite neat on its own. This dash is comprised of a large vacuum fluorescent display, which is home to your speedometer, odometer, trip meter, clock, gas gauge, and a few other readouts. There's also this button that allows you to swap the dash between the metric system and freedom units, and the button even converts values in the touchscreen as well. Oh, and by the way, do you have a friend who always seems to be driving around with the low fuel light illuminated in their car? Well, this is the car for them because by pressing this gas gauge button on the dashboard, the readout for your tank level will zoom in on that last quarter to really show you just how little is sloshing around back there. Since we're in the area, I might as well show you the few physical controls that this car has as well. To the left of the wheel lies most of your lighting controls, while on the right side has buttons for your wipers and defrosters. Moving down to the center console, we have, of course, the gear select for the automatic transmission, along with toggle switches for the powered windows and the controls for the powered mirrors. Lastly, on the bottom of the center stack, we have buttons for controlling some of the mechanical items, such as the trunk popper, fuel door, glove box, and a button to manually pop the headlights up. Oh yeah, now that I mention it, we also can't skip over the other feature that drew me to this car: pop-up headlights. I have always wanted a car with this feature, so of course the fact that the Riata has them is just icing on the cake. And, well, since we're on the exterior now, I'll give you a look around the exterior of the Riata. Apart from the pop-ups on the front, this car also features a full-width light bar for the rear lamp assembly. This was a styling element that Buick started featuring on some of their vehicles at the time, and this design absolutely looks its best here on the Riata. I have to say, I really love the lighting in general on this car. The whole thing just looks like a miniature spaceship. And yes, with that touchscreen and VFD dashboard panel glowing at night, it definitely feels like you're piloting a spaceship around when you drive it. The Riata included so many standard features from the factory that you only had two options available when you purchased your car, which were a retractable sunroof and 16-way power adjustable seats. What's even more interesting is that the sunroof wasn't even available initially during the 1988 launch year, which sadly my car predates and so does not have the sunroof. However, being that my car is an early 88 model, what it does have are these rather rare seats. So the first Riatas out of the factory featured special suede bolsters on the leather seats, which my car in fact has. However, during production, GM was receiving complaints from customers regarding the care needed for maintaining the suede, and after around 1,500 Riatas produced with these seats, they eventually discontinued the suede and switched to an all-leather build. Oh, and on the topic of seats, this car only has two of them. Instead of seats for the rear passengers, like what could be found in the Riviera, which it was based off of, the Riata features this luggage shelf with two storage cubbies built into the deck, and an access panel that serves as a pass-through for the trunk. For a rather small car, the trunk itself is surprisingly roomy too. However, much to the dismay of MotorWeek's John Davis, the big light bar does cause for a rather high trunk liftover that can impede loading some larger cargo into the back of the Riata. After the first 2 years of production, the Riata received a refresh in 1990, which also finally introduced the soft-top convertible option to the market. However, while the refresh brought an admittedly even cooler VFD dashboard to the Riata, unfortunately the touchscreen was discontinued and the car received a generic center stack with conventional buttons for the controls. During the final year of production, the Riata also received an upgraded engine as well. Under the hood, we find the venerable Buick 3800 V6, which was all new for the Riata's debut year in 1988. This particular version of the 38 is often referred to as the Pre-Series 1 and was rated at around 165 horsepower. Power is transferred to the front wheels through a 4-speed automatic gearbox, and for the time, this drivetrain wasn't going to win any races, but still was decent for what it was, and even today the Riata can easily keep up with modern traffic. Here's me doing a pull down an on-ramp, and the car doesn't have any trouble getting up to highway speeds in time for the merge. In fact, I find that the interstate is where my Riata is most happy. The sleek styling really does cut through the air quite well, and oftentimes I have to remind myself to check my speeds since the car feels like it just wants to go and go. This thing is far sleeker than anything that General Motors had in their wheelhouse at the time, especially from their Buick marquee. For context, these are the other cars that you expect to find in a Buick dealership at the same time that the Riata was on sale. Even more jarring is when you compare my Riata to the other classic vehicle that I own, my 1988 Cadillac Brougham. These two cars were both built by General Motors during the same exact year, but the two of them couldn't be further apart in design. My Cadillac is a straight up dinosaur compared to my spaceship of a Buick. But in reality, I love my Cadillac just as much, and I definitely plan to cover this land barge in a future video as well. You'll often hear of the Riata being referred to as Buick's halo car, a flagship vehicle designed to make a bold statement regarding what the brand has to offer. I find that the marketing slogan that GM stablemate Oldsmobile used applies here as well, in that the Riata was definitely not your father's Buick. GM hoped that this sleek coupe would draw in the youthful executive types into their Buick dealerships, and away from the European brands, which were far more popular with this particular demographic. Unfortunately, this was not how the car ended up panning out, though. It was just far too expensive for what you got, and even had a higher sticker price than my Cadillac. In the end, only around 21,000 Riatas were sold during the 4 years of production. Now, of course, being a General Motors product of the 1980s, the Riata isn't without its faults and build quality issues, but fortunately the majority of them can be fixed with little fuss. The mechanisms that work the pop-up lights tend to wear out with use, but rebuild kits are plentiful online. On these pre-Series 1 3800s, the usual culprits that can cause an engine issue are most often the ignition control module, the crankshaft position sensor, and most frequently the idle air control valve. Thankfully, these are all simple repairs that a do-it-yourselfer can tackle on their own, with only the crankshaft sensor requiring a special tool for pulling the harmonic balancer to access it. And surprisingly, the touchscreens don't usually fail as frequently as you'd think they would. However, what is much more common to fail would be the high-voltage power supply that drives the CRT and the digital dash. These modules are located underneath the dashboard in the area around where the gas pedal lies. I actually had the power supply in my Riata fail at one point, which caused all of the interior panels to flicker on and off. But all it took was about a half hour of strange yoga poses to crawl under there and swap out the modules. However, the biggest time bomb that lurks within these cars would be the ABS system. These early Teves units are known for failing catastrophically if not properly cared for, which can result in the Riata completely losing all braking capabilities without warning. But fortunately, these failures can be prevented through routine brake fluid changes every few years and the replacement of the accumulator. Other than these faults, though, the Riata is relatively simple to maintain, and fortunately, mechanical parts are still, for the most part, easy and inexpensive to source. Drivetrain-wise, these cars share a ton of similarities with many other GM cars produced at the time, so some of the common wear items can be found through nearly every parts store out there. What does get difficult to source on these cars is anything cosmetic. Every body panel on the Riata is very bespoke to the car, and should you ever get in an accident and you need to replace a panel, your only real option would be to source one from a parts car somewhere. I'm terrified if I ever have to replace a piece of glass on this thing, particularly the windshield or the huge rear window. These, along with the plastic front fender pieces, are practically unobtainium unless you have a donor card to take some good pieces from. And speaking of the rear glass, this feature is also one of the bad things about the car's design. Well, I love the rear visibility out this window. During the summer months, this car turns into an absolute greenhouse when sitting out in the sun. Thank goodness my AC works just fine in my Riata, otherwise, I'd easily boil to death inside this fishbowl of a cabin. And my only other complaint about the car would have to do with the taillights. While the light bar looks oh so cool, to achieve this effect, this thing has 14 light bulbs inside of it. And whenever any of them burn out, you have to pull apart the trunk liner and remove the entire housing from the car in order to change one of the bulbs. The only other thing I want to make a note of is the turn signal chime. Yes, this thing doesn't click, it chimes at you as if you have your seatbelt unbuckled or something. But I do have cornering lamps on this thing though, so that's a cool plus. So that covers pretty much everything about the Riata, but now I'm going to talk a bit about my specific Riata. So I've owned this car since May of 2023, and as it sits now, it is just shy of reaching 36,000 miles on the clock. And this car is such a blast to drive. Despite being 36 years old as of filming this video, this car drives like it's brand new. The car rides so smoothly and straight as an arrow along the highway. I know quite a few reviews of the car tend to lament the rather underpowered drivetrain and the so-called tragedy of the Riata never getting a manual transmission option, but I didn't buy this car to set track times. If I really wanted to go fast, there are far better options I could have spent my money on. For me, I don't buy things for the performance, I buy things for the experience. And let me tell you, driving around with the interior being bathed in the green phosphor glow of the touchscreen and dashboard is just truly awesome to behold. I really enjoy this look into the future from decades in the past. It's a really unique feeling driving something like this alongside modern traffic. Again, that's also why I own my Cadillac as well. That thing is an even more insane experience to roll around in. Because of my love for this car, I definitely also have my fair share of Riata swag as well. First, of course, is the official repair manual. Let me tell you, given how much of this car is electronic, this holy bible of Riata information is pretty much essential for every owner to have if you ever want to attempt to diagnose something. Also, remember how I mentioned the suede seats? I actually have a dealership-provided cleaning kit for them, still unused. And given how old this fluid is, I plan to continue to never use this on my car. I was also gifted from a friend this nifty keychain that commemorates Buick's 85th anniversary with the release of the Riata. Of course, I also have a toy car that matches my real car, and not only do I have the sales brochure that shows off all of the glitz and glamour that the car has to offer, but I also have this press kit that was designed to prepare the dealerships for the debut of the Riata on their showroom floors. This packet even includes these slide film shots of the car and some full-color glamour shots of the Riata. Oh, and speaking of dealerships, I also own a freaking dealership light-up sign of the Riata logo. This massive thing would have been glowing in the showroom window back in the day to draw everyone's eyes to the car. And ordinarily, I keep it hung up in front of my game room window, but I even take this thing along with me to car shows to display next to my Riata. It even manages to fit inside of my trunk. And lastly, what 1980s General Motors product would be complete without the official audio cassette tape? I think I'll close out the video with a small sampling of the contents of this tape for you to listen to.
You're one of the few specially chosen guests invited to a very exclusive premiere. As a devotee of quality, beauty, and the very best life has to offer, we want you to attend the debut of Riata, a dramatic new car designed by Buick to complement your highly selective lifestyle. You may not need a car like the Riata, but you're going to want one. A gift to yourself just for being who you are. Sophisticated, a front runner, and very quality conscious. After all, you work hard to enjoy the best. So why not keep on rewarding yourself for a life spent exactly the way you planned? And what better way to continue indulging than with a Riata, the newest, most elegant automobile from Buick Motor Division, makers of only premium American motor cars. The Riata easily creates the illusion of a high-minded sports car through and through, but it tends to be a bit of a tease because it has an innovative distinction not shared by any other car. Riata has the sassy look and attitude of a sports car blended with the spacious ambiance of a lavish luxury car. And listen to this. The Riata is built just for two. You and someone considered special enough to pamper.
Riata is a limited production series, exclusively handcrafted in America by highly trained craftsmen, far from an assembly line. Your well-deserved demand for quality workmanship is their primary concern. Each Riata is test-driven and must pass an extensive evaluation before delivery to the dealer. At first glance, the Riata has the same allure as your favorite designer's new line. It will certainly whet your fascination for handmade possessions, those much desired and sought after rarities in an otherwise mass-produced marketplace. Riata's front-wheel drive maintains a firm grip on the road up to your favorite ski run or down to a warm, very private beach. Rest assured that wherever you go, friends and curious strangers will admire your Riata's sensual styling.
So that concludes our look at my 1988 Buick Reatta. I thank you for joining me on this tour. I've been wanting to make this video ever since I first brought my car home, and I'm so glad to have finally put all of this together to share with you. Stick around for more great assorted stuff in the future, and until then, have a great day, everybody.